I used to think loyalty still meant something. In my head, it was simple math. You give your time, your effort, your best years, and in return, the company gives you honesty. Not parades, not plaques. Just fairness. That's all I ever wanted. And maybe that's why what happened still stings. It started with an email, a hey, quick question about your year-end comp kind of thing. Casual, almost lazy. The kind of message you open standing in the hallway, expecting nothing. But that one line, that one email, started the slow burn that changed everything. I'd been with the company for 5 years, a mid-sized tech firm, all buzzwords and beanbags, pretending to be a startup, long after it had become an old creaky machine. My title was Operations Lead, which meant everything from cleaning up after project managers to keeping the system from collapsing under its own weight. If something broke, I fixed it. If someone quit, I filled in. My name wasn't on the website, but half the deadlines survived because I stayed late. Last December, my manager, Paul, called me into his office. He closed the door like it was a ceremony. "You've done a hell of a job, Matt," he said. "We're approving a $6,000 performance bonus for you." $6,000. It wasn't life-changing, but it was a nod. A sign that someone noticed the nights, the weekends, the missed dinners. I walked out of that office lighter. January rolled in, gray and ordinary. Then February. Then March. No bonus. No mention. I told myself, they're slow. Accounting's behind. It'll come. It always comes. It didn't. By April, my paycheck looked the same as always. When I asked Paul casually about it during our one-on-one, he blinked like he'd never heard the word before. "Bonus?" he said. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "You mentioned a $6,000 one for last quarter's work. The documentation should have gone through." He leaned back in his chair. "I don't recall confirming that amount. You might be mixing things up." My stomach dropped. Mixing things up? He shrugged, lazy, careless. "You know how performance incentives work. Nothing's official until HR finalizes it." I remember staring at him, the same man who'd looked me in the eye 3 months ago and said, "We're approving it." My palms were sweating. "You literally told me—" He cut me off with a laugh that wasn't friendly. "Matt, you've got to stop taking every conversation like it's written in stone." That was the first crack. The second came later that week when I emailed HR, attaching Paul's notes from our review. They replied with a 2-line message. "Hi, Matt. Thank you for reaching out. We're not seeing any approved bonuses attached to your record. Let us know if you have supporting documentation." Supporting documentation, the phrase corporate people use when they're already pretending not to know you. I spent that weekend going through my files, rereading old Slack threads, even screenshots I'd saved from performance reports. It was all there, mentions of the bonus, acknowledgments, the works. But something told me this wasn't just an oversight, it felt planned. Still, I wanted to believe it was a mistake. So Monday morning, I walked into Paul's office again. Calm, polite. "Hey, Paul, I sent HR the documentation. They said they can't find the bonus approval. Do you want to resend it?" He didn't even look up from his screen. "Matt, there's nothing to resend." I stood there for a few seconds. "You said—" "I said we'd discuss a potential bonus," he interrupted. "Don't twist my words." Something cold hit the back of my throat. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't say potential. You said approved." That made him look up. His eyes were flat. "Matt, if you're going to start getting defensive about money, maybe we should talk about your attitude instead." Attitude. The corporate nuke they drop when they can't defend their actions. I left his office shaking. Not from anger, yet, but from disbelief. I went outside, leaned against my car, and stared at the glass tower that I'd once been proud to walk into. It looked different now. It looked like a machine that eats people and spits out silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every replay of that conversation made me feel smaller. I'd given them everything. I'd stayed through layoffs, system failures, and 3 a.m. emergency calls. I was the guy they could count on. And when it came time to count something back, They erased the ledger. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How HR avoided eye contact when I passed their desk. How Paul suddenly CC'd the CFO on every message about budgets. How my name stopped appearing in project updates. It wasn't random. It was insulation. I told myself to wait it out, to stay professional. But something inside me had already shifted. Trust doesn't explode. It erodes. Quietly. Then came the meeting invite. Subject: performance review alignment. Attendees: Paul, HR director, CFO. I opened it, heart pounding, because there was no reason for me to be there, unless something was wrong. The morning of that meeting, I sat at my desk, watching the reflection of the conference room glass. 3 people inside, coffee cups lined like props, voices muffled through the door. I told myself to stay calm, but deep down, something whispered that this wasn't a review. It was a burial. When they finally called me in, Paul smiled like he was about to do me a favor. "Matt, thanks for joining. We just wanted to clarify a few things about last quarter's compensation conversation. Conversation, not commitment." He gestured for me to sit. HR smiled politely. The CFO didn't smile at all. I folded my hands. "Sure, clarify away." Paul leaned forward. "You seem to be under the impression that a $6,000 bonus was promised to you." "Not under the impression," I said. "You told me." He chuckled. "That's not how I remember it." I glanced at HR. "And you?" She shifted in her seat. "We can't find any formal documentation." I nodded slowly. "So you're saying the bonus doesn't exist?" Paul spread his hands. "That's correct." Something in me went completely still, like the air had just changed weight. I smiled once, small and sharp. "Okay." That was all I said. But in my head, a quiet switch flipped, because I knew something they didn't, and that was just the beginning. When people lie to your face, they expect one of 2 reactions: anger or surrender. What they don't expect is silence, the kind that means you're already thinking 10 steps ahead. I walked out of that meeting without saying a word, not even a glance back. The CFO's eyes followed me like he was checking for cracks. Paul called after me, "Let's keep things professional, Matt." But it sounded less like advice and more like a warning. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Back at my desk, the office felt colder. The hum of the AC, the chatter, the keyboards, everything moved as if I wasn't there. Invisible. Disposable. That's when I realized it. I wasn't part of the team anymore. I was a problem to be managed. That afternoon, I opened my email and read the HR follow-up. To summarize, there is no record of any bonus approval for Q4. This matter is considered closed unless new information arises. Thank you. Closed. The word sat on the screen like a period carved in stone. I stared at it for a long time before clicking reply. My hands were steady. My message was short. "Understood. Please expect new information." Then I locked my screen, grabbed my jacket, and went home. It wasn't rage that drove me. It was clarity. Rage makes noise. Clarity works quietly. At home, I opened my laptop and started going through every email, every project summary, every document from the past year. I wasn't just looking for the word bonus. I was looking for patterns, for proof of what kind of company this really was. By midnight, I found it. 3 projects. Each one I had single-handedly saved after budget cuts. Each one that Paul later presented to the executive team as his initiative. And each one followed by a performance alignment meeting just like mine. Small, quiet, off the books. I started connecting names. 2 colleagues who had left abruptly after their reviews. One of them had been promised a retention bonus. The other had been told her raise was pending finalization. Both had emails that mysteriously disappeared from the shared drive a week before they quit. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. And I had something Paul didn't know I had. My personal archives. A habit from my early days in operations. Backing up project emails and performance logs every quarter to an external drive just in case. That drive had copies of the emails Paul had deleted, complete with timestamps and metadata. When I scrolled through the December folder, I saw the message. Approved. $6,000 bonus for Matt, Q4. Sent by Paul. CC'd to HR. CC'd to the CFO. They'd all seen it. They'd all let it vanish. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the glowing screen. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic. The people who smiled in the break room were the same people who'd quietly signed off on cutting me out. Still, I didn't print it. Didn't storm back into the office. Not yet. I wanted to see what would happen if I gave them one more chance. The next morning, I showed up early. Paul arrived late, as always. Coffee in hand, sunglasses still on, even though the office was half dark. "Morning," I said. He looked at me, surprised by my calm. "Morning? Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said. "I just wanted to thank you for the clarity yesterday." He smiled like a man who thinks the fight's already won. "Glad we could clear things up." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." I let the silence stretch a little before adding, "Just so I know, if HR ever needs to review communications about the bonus, they can reach out to you, right?" He hesitated. "There are no communications to review, Matt. We've been through this." "Of course," I said, nodding. "Just making sure our stories match." He froze for half a second, then forced a laugh. "You're overthinking this." Maybe I was, or maybe he'd just felt the ground shift. By lunch, whispers were moving around the office. Someone had seen me leaving the meeting room looking calm. Someone else had noticed Paul in the CFO's office with the door closed. Corporate fear travels fast, faster than truth sometimes. At 3 p.m., HR called me again. "Matt, could you step in for a quick chat?" Her tone was soft, practiced, the kind people use when they're trying to sound friendly but keep their distance. "Sure," I said, standing up. "Is this about yesterday?" "Yes," she said. "We just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding." I walked into her glass-walled office. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The CFO was already there. He gestured to the chair. "Matt, sit." I sat, folded my hands, waited. The CFO cleared his throat. "Paul tells us there's been a miscommunication about a bonus. We wanted to hear your perspective directly." "My perspective?" I asked. "That's new." He didn't smile. "Paul says he never promised a bonus." "And I say he did," I replied, "which means someone's lying." HR shifted. "Matt, no one's accusing anyone of lying. We're just clarifying." I nodded slowly. "You said the matter was closed, right?" "That's correct." "Good," I said, standing up. "Then I'll take it outside the company." That got their attention. "Outside?" the CFO asked. "Sure," I said. "Labor board, maybe. Legal counsel, whichever one reads faster." Their faces changed. Not panic yet, but the first twitch of it. "Matt," HR said quickly, "there's no need to escalate. Let's just—" "No," I said, calm as ever. "You said it's closed. I'm just confirming the next step." For a second, no one spoke. The CFO rubbed his temple. HR's pen trembled in her hand. Then he sighed. "Let's not make this adversarial." "I didn't," I said. "You did." I left before they could say another word. Outside, the sun was setting over the parking lot, turning the windows into golden fire. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, like nothing bad could happen in a place that bright, but I knew better now. Inside that glass box, people smiled while cutting your throat. And as I drove home, I realized something that made me almost laugh. They thought this was over. They thought I'd go quiet. I didn't. People imagine revenge is loud. A slammed door, a raised voice, maybe a scene in the middle of the office. But real revenge, it's quiet. It's timing. It's patience. That night, I made coffee at 1 a.m. and started building a file. Not a folder, not a note, a case. I labeled it Q4 Compensation Evidence. Inside, I placed copies of every email Paul sent me about that bonus, HR's acknowledgement, the approval from the CFO, and even the Slack screenshots where Paul bragged to another manager about rewarding high performers. I didn't need to add context. The dates and signatures did all the talking. Then I drafted one last email, not to Paul, not to HR, to the CFO directly. Subject: documentation regarding compensation discrepancy. Hi, David. Per your statement that no record of the $6,000 bonus exists, please find attached all relevant communications from December, including internal approvals, timestamps, and metadata. I'm submitting this to ensure compliance with company policy and federal labor standards. Kind regards, Matt Reynolds. I scheduled it to send at 9 a.m. sharp, 1 minute before our weekly company-wide meeting. At 9:03, I watched from my seat in the back row as David, the CFO, opened his laptop at the head of the conference table. His face changed, the kind of change that starts in the eyes and drains everything else. Paul walked in 2 minutes later, still smiling from some joke. He saw the expression on David's face and froze mid-step. HR followed, coffee in hand. She looked from one to the other, already pale. The meeting started, but nobody was listening. The CFO's voice was somewhere else, scanning the attachments, scrolling through proof he couldn't unsee. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The room was heavy with the silence of realization. 20 minutes later, my name popped up on my monitor. From David Morrison. Subject: urgent. Please stop by my office after the meeting. I waited, let him sweat. When I walked in, he was standing by the window, arms crossed. The city stretched behind him. Clean, bright, expensive. Matt, he began, turning to face me. This is serious. It is, I said evenly. That's why I documented everything. He gestured to the printouts on his desk. Do you realize what this implies? I do, I said. It implies I was telling the truth. Paul was in the corner, quiet now, his usual smirk gone, replaced by the look of a man trying to shrink into the drywall. The CFO took a slow breath. I'll need some time to review this. We'll need to involve legal. Of course, I said. I'll cooperate fully. He nodded once. In the meantime, please refrain from discussing this matter with other employees. I smiled faintly. You mean the ones you already discussed it with? For the first time since I'd known him, David had no comeback. I walked out of that office lighter than I'd felt in months. But this wasn't about celebration. It was about proof. About showing them that their arrogance wasn't invisible. By lunchtime, whispers had already spread through the building. I didn't say a word, but the story was traveling on its own. People could feel when something shifts, when the wrong person finally picks the wrong target. At 2 p.m., HR sent out a vague email. Due to internal discrepancies, all year-end compensation files are under audit. Please refrain from discussing salary matters. It was a weak attempt at control, and everyone knew it. Paul didn't come by my desk that day, or the next. By Friday, his office door stayed closed. He stopped appearing in meetings. The only time I saw him was in the parking lot, on his phone, pacing like a man watching his house burn from the outside. Then on Monday, everything broke. The CFO called a departmental check-in, the kind of meeting they use when HR has advice, but PR hasn't written the script yet. We all gathered in the large room with the glass wall that overlooked the courtyard. Paul wasn't there. Neither was the HR director. The CFO cleared his throat, voice thin. As you all know, we've been conducting a review of last quarter's performance incentives. During that review, we identified discrepancies that do not align with our values of transparency. He paused, letting the words hang like smoke. Effective immediately, certain leadership transitions will be taking place. No one said a word. You could hear the hum of the projector. Then someone in the back whispered, "He's out, isn't he?" And just like that, the tension snapped. A few people exchanged glances. One guy actually smiled. I sat there, expression neutral, watching the dominoes fall. After the meeting, David approached me quietly. "Matt, thank you for your diligence. I'll make sure this is corrected immediately." "I'm sure you will," I said. By that afternoon, my bonus and more was deposited in my account. and even $10,000. No explanation, no apology. Just money, the corporate way of saying we're sorry, but not enough to say it out loud. Paul cleared out his office before anyone could say goodbye. HR didn't return the next week either. The official story was internal restructuring, but everyone knew. That evening, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot, watching the office lights turn off one by one. The same windows I'd once looked up to now felt small, contained. I'd thought exposing them would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like gravity, a weight settling into place, because I didn't win anything. I just stopped being played. Still, as I started the engine, I caught my reflection in the windshield. Steady, calm, older. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. They thought I'd stay silent. I didn't. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. The building looked different. After everything, same gray walls, same elevator chime. But it all felt smaller, like I'd outgrown it without realizing. The hallways that used to hum with energy now just echoed with whispers. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't walking in to prove anything. I was walking in to finish it. A week after Paul's departure, the company held one of those morale meetings. Pizza boxes, awkward applause. Corporate optimism sprayed over cracks in the drywall. The CFO stood in front of everyone, his voice too bright, too measured. He talked about fresh leadership, restructuring, and moving forward. No one mentioned the word bonus. No one had to. They all knew. When the meeting ended, people came up to me. Quiet pats on the shoulder, murmured good for you, and looks that said what words couldn't. But I didn't feel triumphant, just still, calm. Because here's the thing they never tell you, justice doesn't roar, it exhales. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. There was one last email waiting in my inbox, from the CFO. Subject, final confirmation. Matt, please confirm that your compensation matter has been resolved to your satisfaction. Best. David. I read it twice, then hit reply. Subject, final confirmation. Hi, David. Yes, it's resolved. You can close the file now, Matt. No drama, no victory speech. Just the end of a story that had already run its course. I shut the laptop and sat there in the quiet of my apartment. No noise, no pretense, no corporate theater. Just peace. The kind that doesn't need an audience. A few days later, I took a day off. First one in years. No emails, no phone. Just me, a cup of coffee, and a walk through the park I used to drive past every morning on the way to the office. The sky was gray, but it felt lighter than it had in months. It hit me halfway down the trail. The realization that this wasn't about money anymore. It was about boundaries. About the invisible lines you let people cross. Until one day you look down and realize you've given them everything. Your time, your energy, your self-respect. And they still ask for more. I'd stopped that. I'd drawn a line, and for once, it held. That weekend, I met up with an old colleague who'd left the company 2 years earlier. We sat at a small diner off the freeway, the kind of place with chipped mugs and real conversations. She leaned across the table. I heard what happened, she said. Word travels, I replied. They finally paid you? They did. And Paul? Gone. She smiled, slow and knowing. You must feel good. I feel finished, I said. That's better than good. She nodded. You know, you always were the one holding that place together. They just didn't realize it until it started falling apart. I laughed quietly. Maybe. But that's their problem now. When I got home that evening, I opened my bank app one last time. The $10,000 still sitting there like an afterthought. Proof that even systems built on silence can crack when someone refuses to play by their rules. I transferred half to savings, half to something I'd been putting off for years. A short solo trip up north, somewhere with no office towers, no fluorescent lights, no alignment meetings. 2 weeks later, I was standing by the coast, salt in the air, wind sharp enough to clean out whatever was left of the anger. I didn't check my email, didn't think about bonuses or bosses or boardrooms. I just watched the horizon until the noise in my head faded. They taught me what silence costs. Now they were the ones paying for it. A few months passed. I started freelancing, smaller clients, cleaner contracts, no politics. My name was finally attached to my own work. No one could take credit for it. Sometimes, late at night, I'd get a LinkedIn notification. Someone from the old office checking my profile. Maybe Paul, maybe HR, maybe just curious to see if I'd vanished. I hadn't. I was just somewhere quieter. One evening, out of habit, I checked the company's site. New logo, new leadership, a commitment to transparency statement on the front page. I almost laughed. I guess my ghost still haunted the glass. Then, an unexpected email popped up from a name I hadn't seen in months. Sarah, HR Director. Subject, reaching out. Hi, Matt. I just wanted to say, you were right. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm sorry. I've left the company. I hope you're doing well. Best, Sarah. I read it twice. No anger, no satisfaction, just a strange, quiet empathy. Sometimes people stay silent because they're scared. Sometimes because they're complicit. Either way, the result's the same. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Later that night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering in the distance. The reflection looking back at me wasn't the same man who'd once believed loyalty was a two-way street. He was older now, not harder, just clearer. And when I finally shut the light and let the room go dark, one thought crossed my mind, steady and sure. They can take your title. They can take your bonus. But once you stop letting them take your voice, you win. That's what they never understood. Because I didn't need to raise mine to be heard. I just needed to say one thing. Once, and mean it. They asked, what bonus? Now they know.